everyone. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Crossing Boundaries. And today we are talking about meditation and mindfulness. And we have two amazing guests who I will introduce in a minute. But Kim, we were talking earlier about how travel can affect mindfulness. And you told me about how it affected you personally. So I was wondering if you can share just a little bit about experience.
Yeah, sure, of course. So as an Israeli, I went to the IDF. I did my 2-year service. I actually stayed a bit longer. And when you finish that, you kind of feel like you were someone else's property. And then all of a sudden you're free. And most Israelis travel right away. I decided to travel and volunteer. I felt like I needed something a bit different and a lot of self-reflection. And I got to Ethiopia and I was volunteering at a hospital and seeing pretty horrible things that I think until today I'm still trying to realize what I saw. And I started meditating. I didn't go with anything built or something that I was listening to. I just decided to call it a meditation. I don't know if that would be the right word, but I would sit every day for about 15 minutes with myself with music, and I created this mantra that helped me cope with what I was seeing every day. It helped me learn a lot about myself and a lot about actually Israel and Palestine, which surprised me. And you actually wrote about it in your book. For those reading. So I'm happy to have both of these amazing human beings that can tell us a bit more about what it is to be mindful and what it's like to travel in that mindset. So thank you for joining us. Thank you both for coming and joining us tonight.
Right, and Davidji is a globally recognized mindfulness and mind, body, health, and wellness expert, mindful performance trainer, meditation teacher, and author. It's just so many amazing things. He has taught millions of people around the world to heal their hearts, plan powerful intentions, and manifest their dream and lives and their dream lives. And I think there's nothing we need more than really being mindful right now, especially with everything that's going on. And I know you come from a background of corporate background, which is maybe not the thing we think about when we think of someone who's in that direction. But let me introduce Shelly quickly, and then I have a question for you, Davidji. Shelly, you also come from corporate world where you worked with the last 20 years with Fortune 1000 organizations, and then the last decade, high-ranking executive in public and privately held companies. But then you also decided to turn to teaching modern life mindfulness as a full-time, and became a self-care activist who focused much of her time on communities that are undeserved, social justice, community organizations, and nonprofits and schools. So we are very, very honored to have both of you join us, and I'm looking forward to learn from this experience. Davidji, I just was wondering what makes someone leaving the corporate world and decides to go into this new direction, and how does that even go?
Well, I think there are probably two paths, or two primary paths. One is the path of extreme pain. And I think pain can be a very, very powerful motivator. When suddenly you realize that whatever you thought life was supposed to be suddenly is not that way, then that can rock you in a lot of different ways. It can be from a death. It can be from a loss. It can be from essentially your world being turned on its head. For me, that catalyst was 9/11. And I was living in New York, and I'd worked in the World Trade Center for a bunch of years, and really in the wake of 9/11, I had a crisis of of conscience. Some people could say it's a nervous breakdown, but for me, it was having such extreme pain, and I'd lived in New York my whole life, and suddenly these towers that I'd seen every single day for 30 years, and then suddenly, on 9/11, I got to witness them from about 20 blocks north, collapsing. When something like that happens, it shakes your worldview. I'm sure a lot of people can say, well, I've made all the money I need to make, so let me pursue a path of mindfulness. But I think that, and I know this to be the case with Shelly too. At a certain point, you feel a calling. And you could say you're being called by God or the universe or something deeper, where you suddenly realize that whatever plane that you've been living on or playing on for most of your life, suddenly there's more. And so there's a summoning or a calling. It's a classic Joseph Campbell's hero's journey kind of process, which, Kim also was on that same exact hero's journey. But I think, so pain can be a motivator, but suddenly also like a moment of clarity. And as meditation teachers, as mindfulness practitioners, we recognize the power of this concept known as a pattern interrupt, a break in the action. We teach people to integrate that into their daily life so they can make better choices in their life. But when it happens, and suddenly there's a giant time in that God or the universe suddenly says, okay, we're living it right now. Certainly this interesting time that we're living in right now has also delivered a massive pattern interrupt, and that's why so many people right now are, we could say, oh, everyone's waking up, but there's suddenly been a break in the action, and there wasn't that break before. So for me, it was a massive pattern interrupt where everything was not the way, and suddenly it was the universe taking a giant breath. We're in that space now where people get to reflect a little longer, where people get to, consider, like, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? What's my meaning? And normally when those things happen, you're too busy doing other stuff. You got to get to work and you got to pay the bills and you got to do all this other stuff. But suddenly when there's like this earth-shattering stop, the ancient teachings in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 48, when God is talking to Arjuna, the great warrior, and we could make that same parallel to the great, member of the IDF, whatever that is. And he says, Arjuna says, how am I supposed to live my life? How am I supposed to walk through the world? And God replies to him, Yoga sta kuru karmani, establish yourself in the present moment, and then perform action, then speak, then think, then take a step. And so I view it as a gift, and so we can see the gratitude in 9/11, the gratitude in COVID-19, the gratitude in all these horrific things where suddenly everything just stops, and we have that moment to take a breath and then think clearly, maybe for a millisecond, maybe for 10 days or a year. But for me, that's really what it was, a giant pattern interrupt. And I think for most people, this is a gift because we've all been praying for this. We've been praying for this moment for probably 10,000 times in our lives. I wish I could spend more time at home. I wish I could get a break from my job. I wish things would just slow down. I wish cars would stop polluting. I wish all this horrible waste that we're dumping onto the planet could just like ease for a little bit. And poof, here we are. Maybe not as we anticipated, but here we are nonetheless.
Definitely. Shelly, you went through a similar transition. Can you tell us a bit about your story?
So I guess my pattern interrupt happened not in one like cataclysmic moment like 9/11, but actually just happened. It was like the making of the David, not of the Davidji, but of the David. It was just like a hammer and a chisel, just little bit by bit. A piece of my soul would just kind of wither away every day as I would commute to the office, and it finally came to pass that I realized, what am I doing? Like, is this as good as it gets? All my life, I've lived this goal-oriented life, had to-do lists, made sure that I achieved and had all of the things that, were supposed to bring me happiness, a lot of stuff, a mortgage, husband, kids, obligations, a title, being involved, in my son's PTA, baking cupcakes, doing all of these things. And just realized, once I finally reached kind of what I thought would be that pinnacle as the president of a mid-sized firm, I was the most miserable I'd ever been in my entire life. And the only thing that would provide me with solace, the only thing that would provide me with this like sacred moment actually took place pretty much every single day on my bathroom floor, because that was the only place I could find peace, was either sitting in the shower and crying hysterically or sitting on a bathroom floor and just not being bothered by people in my family. And I finally realized that I have something to say and that I'm not the only person that feels that way. When I started to be vulnerable and share what I was going through, and that I didn't have it all together, and that I was really cracking in so many different places, and I was so fractured. I had an autoimmune condition, I still do, and was having very frequent flare-ups, which caused blindness in my eyes. And so I just finally got to the point where I said, I need to make a change, and I'm sick and tired of complaining about it. And I think I have something to say. I know that there are people that need to hear what I have to say, and I'm willing to finally take a chance on myself and bet that if I make this move, if I take this leap of faith, if I make this, this jump, that everything will still be okay. And so I did. But it took a long time to get there. It was definitely not like an overnight decision of, I'm miserable, I'm quitting. It was, it wasn't like that at all. It was very like, I have to think about this. How am I going to support my family? How am I going to meet my obligations? And I think the important part of it is that, it's really creating that connection between saying what we want to do and actually like doing it. Is the people miss the part of like saying it, there's a connection between the two in order for it to manifest itself, right? I actually wrote a resignation letter and I predated it 6 months in advance. I didn't tender it 6 months later, but it was 9 months later. But still, the point is that it was written. And so when it is written and when it is in black and white and when it is so, then it becomes easier to like set the wheels in motion.
Right. And this is a transformation that you're talking about, and it's a very important transformation. I'm wondering, maybe Davidji, how do you take that transformation, personal transformation, and then go into a direction of saying, not only do I want it to transform me, but I also want to take this to others, and I want to teach other people to go through this same transformation?
Well, that's really funny because in the wake of 9/11, I left that world and went on a journey of discovery. I refer to it as my eat, pray, love journey without the eating and the love, just a lot of prayer. As I, so I explored other things. I went to India. I traveled, throughout India, bathed in the Ganges, meditated every morning, practiced yoga, did all the things you're supposed to do on your spiritual journey of awakening. And then I came back home, and a friend of mine said, all you do, welcome home. You've been home for about, a few months now, and all you do is sit around and meditate. And I was like, I know, isn't that amazing? It's like, it's so magnificent. And they said, well, you probably should share that with somebody else. Maybe you should teach other people to meditate. And I remember like so calmly, so casually saying, what do you mean? I'm from New York. I don't care about anybody else's meditation. And I felt like really comfortable about that. Then they said, well, if you really want to learn something, you know, forget altruism, but just learn to teach it. And then you learn it from the inside out. And I was like, all right, I could do that. So, you know, I traveled out to, you know, enrolled in a teacher training, you know, program, you know, got deep into that. And I remember after I got certified, well, what happened was I went to a workshop. Deepak Chopra used to have a center in California. And so I went to a workshop there. And at that workshop, they hired me to run the Chopra Center. So that was like, oh, well, I'm not doing anything anyway, other than sitting around and meditating. Sure, I'll do that. And I remember, like, right after I got certified, you know, like 3 months after I was there, Deepak said, okay, well now, you know, you have to teach. And I was like, I really just wanted to deepen my own practice, but okay. So I started teaching every single day. And after I did that for, you know, a bunch of more months, suddenly, and as I was living it and practicing it and meditating twice a day and talking meditation and living meditation and breathing meditation, suddenly this thing just hit me. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I need to share this with other people. So I don't think it was like a calculated thing where it's like, you know, let me be of service. It sparked from, you know, it was an inspiration, an internal thing. Because I was never about being of service. That wasn't my agenda. That wasn't my jam. But once it was like, this stuff is so amazing. This stuff is so cool. I've lowered my blood pressure. I sleep at night. I've made such more mindful and thoughtful choices. I actually have repaired so many of my horrible, you know, relationships. This is great stuff. So I think that for me, it didn't come from, you know, now let me share my gifts with the world, as much as like, oh, check it out. This is so cool. You have to experience it. And so that's really, you know, for me, that's where my journey was. And it was so funny too, because I was so adamant that I would never, like, who cares about other people's meditation? Let them get on with their own thing. But that spark that hit me, that was like, oh, you know, why would this be kept secret? Let me reveal it. You know, let me at least share everything that I have learned so far.
Oh, nice. I wonder if we then have met before, because I've attended some of Deepak Chopra's stuff before, and we spoke at some panels together. So who knows? Maybe we've met before we realized we've met.
It's probably true. You know, I was there for 10 years, so I'm sure you know our paths, you know, weaved like this. I apologize, you know, for not recognizing. There are a lot of people that you know, Deepak Chopra meets like 10,000 people a week. So I wasn't up on all of them, but I'm sure we did connect, you know, and here we are again, you know. And Shelly and I have almost connected so often as well, because she also had a connection to the Chopra Center and to that process. So, you know, it's divine convergence. That's, you know, that's what's brought us all back together again.
And Shelly, you were talking about about having a voice that needs to be heard, that you have something to say. Did you also have a aha moment of like, wow, people are listening, or this is the message I should bring to other people?
Well, so the one thing that Davidji and I definitely, the convergence here is that we both were reluctant teachers. However, the difference is that I did come from a place of like, I need like an altruistic place of trying to, you know, be like some sort of a savior, like just, you know, like help people and not from a place of like, wow, this is cool, but actually like, this is going to save you. Like, this is something that is just so powerful, and that you have the tools from within to do this, and stop paying $10,000 to walk on coals with people, because you can figure this out on your own. You know, you can be your own guru. And so that was really a huge part of what I believe that I had to say, and that I still tell people. You know, I try to empower them as much as possible to tap into, just as Davidji does, to their own gifts that we each carry and that we all have. But I definitely came at it more from like a sense of like responsibility because, you know, one of the things that I always share with people and that I always talk about is the fact that, you know, it's really great to be doing an inner journey, but like, what's the point of doing an inner journey if we're just going to stay in the inner journey? You know what I mean? There's no finish line. Like, you're never going to be perfect. We already know this, embarking on this journey, that we're never going to get to where, you know, we think we're going to get, right? You just have to keep trying to enhance yourself, enlighten yourself. You know, there's like that process, the toil, as they say in the Talmud, right? You just like have to keep like refining yourself in the process. And so knowing that, having that knowledge that you're never going to get there into the finish line, then you just say, you know, well, you know, this journey shouldn't be taken alone. And I have now a responsibility along the way. And maybe that's part of my refinement, is to bring people along on this journey as well. And so I just think that a lot of people that I know, and a lot of people certainly sometimes in this space, you know, they kind of approach self-help with the notion that they're broken in some way. And the reality is that none of us are broken. We don't need to be fixed. We just need to, you know, tap into what naturally exists. And I think through connection, we can heal ourselves and heal each other.
And that's very important today, especially with what's happening with COVID and how our country, our world has been affected. And I'm wondering, how did this affect you? Well, I know a little bit of what you've been doing on that, and you've taken this to a whole other initiative as well, Shelly. So can you tell us how COVID affected what you do, and then what did you decide to do in response to this situation?
Well, so you know, part of the work that I did pre-COVID or pre-pandemic really lies in working with social justice organizations and communities that are affected by gun violence and mass shootings in this country, in the United States. Which is a lot of people, by the way. It's 40,000 people a year die of gun violence in this country. So imagine how many people those people are connected to. But you know, in part of the trauma-informed kind of approach to teaching mindfulness is, and also creating sustainable formats or formulas for self-care and coping plans within these communities, is a pillar or tenet called mutual aid. And mutual aid is something that I didn't invent. It's been around for thousands of years. And it's based on a very simple tenet and principle that every single human being on this planet has something they need, regardless of their socioeconomic status or who they are. And every single person on this planet has something that they can offer. And so the idea is that if we could formalize this concept of mutual aid, then it becomes so much easier to do the hardest thing ever that it is to do, which is ask for help. And it also becomes much easier to be somebody altruistic, because you could say like, hey, I can do that. I can drive somebody to this appointment. I can walk somebody's dog. I can call and check up on this elderly person that needs a welfare check. And so suddenly we all feel useful, especially at a time when we're like, everything's on a standstill and we're like, we feel helpless, right? In many different ways. And so I have a community in South Florida that, you know, has really been a community that's unlike anything else that I've ever experienced, because it's very diverse in every single way. So it's not like the typical kind of meditation community that when you go into like a studio, and usually it's like a certain large percentage of women who happen to be between this age and that age. But rather it's like this really diverse community that over the last 4 years, we've been able to formalize mutual aid in such a way around the holidays and around, you know, the beginning of the school year and after hurricanes and things like that, where we would just put up on an Excel spreadsheet, kind of like, okay, these are the people that need these things, and here are, you know, just pick a family and adopt them. So I used that concept at the beginning of March. After we got back from Israel, actually, we were the last the last retreat, I think, on this planet, actually. And we got back from Israel, and I started to see the bubblings up, you know, the fear that was being invoked, especially in South Florida, as California started to shut down and New York started to shut down. It was inevitable that it would be coming here. And I thought, okay, we've got to do something, because so many of our community members are hourly wage workers, live on tips, barely make it to the end of the week, so that if we shut down, we have to shelter at home. They're not going to be able to purchase supplies, like even basic supplies, to be able to do that. So I created 2 forms, and it was called the Give Help form and the Get Help form, using Google Forms, because I'm not a very technologically savvy person. And I just put it up on my Instagram page, put a 40-second video up, and that led to some miraculous things, because I went to bed and the next morning I woke up. So this was less than 24 hours later. I sat down with my cup of coffee thinking I'm going to match a few families via email. And I was shocked to see that there were like over 400 people that were asking for help, and over 500 people that were willing to give help. And the number just exponentially kept growing. It got shared by a lot of different influencers, those sheets. And the organization Pandemic of Love started, which was really amazing, because now, you know, the statistics as of today is that we've matched over 500,000 people. So that's 250,000 matches that were made. We've transacted over $34 million since this started. And there are now 210 micro communities around the globe that really are their own chapters that hopefully will continue to create these mutual aid communities and sustain them long after the pandemic is over. And I think what this proves is that that one person can make a difference, number one, and which is what I tell my son all the time. And second of all, that, you know, that love can also be viral, and so can hope and faith and a lot of really beautiful things, not just diseases, you know, and fear and negative things.
Really inspiring, Shelly. I mean, you just talked about the numbers that I didn't know. That was, I was blown away. But it's amazing how a small thought just brought you to this amazing project. And Davidji, I know that you've also had a new project that you started through the COVID time. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, you know, Shelly and I, you know, we always laugh about that, like we're on this same journey and we do different things in that process. You know, my greatest achievement in my life is being Shelly's friend. So that's about what I contribute. You know, I have felt, you know, very strongly that we transform the world by transforming ourselves. And you know, Shelly was right. We were like, it felt like we were like the last plane out of Israel, because like seconds after our plane, you know, left, suddenly, you know, Israel locked down. Everyone else who came in had to be quarantined for 14 days. And, you know, that was sort of like, you know, that was it. And of course, Shelly then like flew off to go to a conference where, like, you know, a super spreader conference in
San Francisco.
In San Francisco. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm going back home. But the work that I have been doing, and it's really the work that I've consistently done, is personal transformation. You know, as I think we all, in those first 30, 45, you know, 60 days, and perhaps now too, 5 months later, you know, it was a pandemic of fear. You know, that's what was sweeping the globe. The unknown, uncertain, bizarre thing where there are no rules. We were always looking for our, you know, our Abba, you know, like tell me what to do, or our Ima, you know, like tell me how to, you know, we were looking for like a nourisher and a guide, and that did not exist on planet Earth. You have like a whole bunch of politicians, you know, running various countries, and they're all like, I have no idea what to do. So that, I think that created even deeper angst, anxiety, and fear, because we're used to having some authority figure, whether it's a parent or a caregiver or a leader, say, here's the path, let's do this, and maybe we'll be safer. And like, no one did that. And, you know, people were trying. Everyone's like experimenting and trying stuff. And the same thing happened in Israel, you know, happened in, you know, China or United States or all over Europe. And so, you know, I was suddenly, so many people were reaching out to me, because one thing that I know is so important to Shelly, as it is to me, is community. You know, we have both always been about, you know, one of our sacred values in life, you know, when something comes into our awareness, you know, one of the questions we're asking, you know, does it satisfy this value of community? Are we just like helping one person here, or is there an expansion where 1 + 1 = infinity, theoretically? And so, you know, I began rolling out, you know, consistent trainings for individuals. You know, that's what I do. Prior to coronavirus, every 3 days I was in another city teaching meditation, and suddenly the brakes got put on that. And so, but I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to say, well, I'll check back, you know, with the world in 6 months or 9 months or 5 years. So, you know, my philosophy has been, since we transform the world by transforming ourselves, and all those things that scare us and horrify us and slow us down is stuff outside of us. And I'm not saying, oh, if you have no money, just think abundantly and it will magically flow to you, you know, because I believe in attention, intention, and action. And so, you know, it takes people, you know, magnificent beings like Shelly to, you know, to connect people and to each other, and to go beyond themselves. But I also think there needs to be a mindset that we all have to live more thoughtfully, to live more mindfully, because no one's the expert here. Everyone's an experimenter. The greatest medical guides we have, you know, our Lord and Master is this guy, Dr. Fauci. Right now, he's like, he holds the keys to the kingdom, you know, whatever he says, we do. But, you know, even he has been like marginalized at times. And, you know, even I think there's a video of him on February 20th saying, this is not an issue for people living in the United States. So it's like, today's genius is tomorrow's perhaps not genius. And today's fool could be tomorrow's genius. Like, we don't know. But in the meantime, we have to make it through 24 hours a day. We have to make sure that the people that we're living with, we're acting kind to, as the walls are squeezing us in. You know, I don't know what's, you know, going on in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv right now, but I'm in California. You know, we're not even allowed to meet in a group of more than one unless they're relatives. So like, how about that? You know, which is interesting. California is its own little country. I think it's the world's 5th largest economy. And we've got very interesting rules here. So suddenly the walls are coming in. You're trapped in a house with people that you thought you were escaping for at least 15 hours a day on a daily basis. And now they're all there. They're all there, and everyone's staring at each other, watching TV, reading, or getting on video games. And so, you know, that can get old after a while. And so I think reconnecting to the core teachings, you know, the teaching of presence, that everyone needs to introduce those pattern interrupts into their daily life so they can breathe and not feel this conditioned, you know, wave just, you know, pushing them. Everyone needs to connect to gratitude. There's even science behind gratitude, you know, that shows that people who have a daily gratitude practice are closer linked to general well-being. They have deeper fulfillment in life, even if they don't have material stuff, even if their other things are not necessarily working. It shifts a certain neural network in our brains that allows us to see the magnificence of life as well, not just the horror and the pain of life. everyone needs to connect to love, to self-kindness, to self-compassion, to self-forgiveness, and to self-love. And, you know, Shelly did not touch on this yet, but she is the goddess of self-care. And so, she teaches self-care through, through activism and for activists. And I'm sort of dealing with all the people who are not. all the people who are not,
who are not yet activists.
Who are not yet. See,
right.
she will not let this go. And that's why, we always say, like, we're like the yin and yang, because, for me, I think, there's, Shelly's numbers are ridiculous. They're off the charts. And hopefully that continues to exponentially grow, and it sweeps the planet. What I'm doing is sort of like getting people ready to, I'm sort of like the funnel that feeds people into Shelly's world. I help people to not be living in fear. And, I've got some pretty large platforms on social media and through my communities. And so this is my opportunity to elevate people like Shelly and the work that they do to help people get still so that they then can march in the streets. But again, I'm a pacifist. I believe very much in peaceful demonstration. And so the truth needs to come out, and I think it can be more, certainly in a social context, it will be more easily listened to and integrated if people are not screaming at the top of their lungs and being driven by hormones and chemicals, but truly are in their best states, their most receptive states. And I believe that transformation only comes when you have this combination of message, messenger, and timing. And if just one of those three things is not there, transformation doesn't happen. You could be totally ready and the person steps up that you love to listen to, but if the message isn't vibing with you, nothing's going to shift. So I like to think I get people ready for Shelly. That's what I do.
So he's the seed planter at the kibbutz, and then harvesting, and basically I just come along once the blossoms and the fruits there, and I just like go, oh look, a pear, a kiwi. Yeah.
Shelly and I had a plan that this summer, we would have been 3 months into it. We were going to be cruising through the United States in an Airstream, getting out the boat, meditating. It was going to be like the mindful journey, and the two of us would be living. We've lived in a bus for a bunch of times, for extended periods already.
Yeah.
So we were really going to be like traveling the world, traveling the United States, pulling into various cities, teaching meditation, and getting people to be aware that, one person can make a difference, certainly with a vote. But, instead, we're here with you guys celebrating, all the powerful work that Meji does. And, that's for me, that's the deepest fulfillment that I could have. I wake up every day and I teach people to meditate, and I do it virtually now, usually from 7 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, staring at that little green dot, on my laptop. That's what I see when I'm dreaming. I see a little green dot. That's how much I'm on Zoom, and that has brought me, so much deep fulfillment.
Can we talk about? You mentioned the last trip you guys did with us on coming to Jerusalem and through the country, Israel and the Palestinian territories. And I wanted to ask you about that trip and what brought it aside, but maybe more even talking about travel and mindfulness. Kim, in the beginning, when we started, shared about how that trip to Ethiopia has brought her to that experience of wanting to meditate. And it is something we are very focused on, is bringing as much as, self, we don't like to tell people what to believe and what to think and all of that. But we hope as people travel, they go through a transformation. And I wonder from your perspective, how does it travel and how did this trip we run together bring transformation and mindfulness to the people who were on that trip?
I mean, well, so, I was a nudnik for many years. I kept saying to Davidji, like, we got to go to Israel together. We got to go to Israel together. Just because we have such interesting parallel paths in our journeys, and kind of like how we went from growing up in traditional Jewish households to, basically creating our own path and blazing our own path. But I always, so for me, I would say, like, in a personal sense, I think I wanted to go to Israel, and I thought it would be so much easier to go back to Israel and to Palestine, like to go back with a bunch of people, because I knew, not last year, but the year before, that going back for me would be like a personal reckoning. And I needed to have this reckoning because I'm still to this day, less so, but I'm a very conflicted Sabra. Like, I was born in Israel, left when I was 2, and, basically had to sort out a bunch of narratives in my head, going back and forth for many years. So that was one part of it. But I think the other part is that what better place to have a mindful journey than the birthplace of contemplative practice, really, like when you think about the widely practiced Judeo-Christian, Muslim faiths all around the world, if we can bring people together and show individuals really the birthplace of like how our forefathers in each of these faiths were able to be still and connect to God and connect to themselves. And if we could then show them how people can coexist, in a place that I think we all have these stigmas, even somebody like me who, was born in Israel and who, I have family members with very different opinions about the way things should be and the way things should be run. And to be able to I think instill hope in people and instill this possibility of coexistence and of peace it's something that's so exportable to any other place. I think there's no better place in the world to actually have this mindful experience from history to present day, and then like internally to like bring it into our future than to be in Israel and in Palestine.
Thank you.
We'll start taking questions from the listeners here and on Facebook as well. But in the meantime, do you have a message that you want the listeners to leave with through this time? Because it doesn't look like anything is changing yet. We're not going back to our normal life yet. What kind of message would you want to leave everyone with? Shelly, you want to start?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
First,
Go ahead.
I think that now more than ever, when we're disconnected, my message has always been, just love over fear. But the way that it translates today, really, is I want to always remind people that it is my responsibility to carry your load, and it's your responsibility to carry mine. And that if we can, if we could share that weight that we have to carry, we're basically just, having the burden for each other. And so I want people to remember to, not be in isolation, and that the inner journey has to include reaching out to others, because we lift ourselves when we lift others as well. So that's part of the healing process.
Yeah, I did want to touch on again, like how Shelly and I ended up with Medji.
Yeah.
And bringing a bunch of people who were all coming for different reasons. You know, when you're in Israel, you realize, oh, there's a whole bunch of Christians who are coming to reconnect to Jesus's journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a whole bunch of people who come to Israel, you know, to do aliyah, to do some type of return and connection and see it for the first time. You know, we didn't know who we were going to attract on our journey the first time that we went, but you know, Shelly had been not nudging me, but you know, reaching out to me with great consistency, like, ready now, years before we decided to go, you know. And then suddenly, I don't know, I woke up one morning and I said, this is it, you know, messenger and timing. And I was like, let's do it, but let's create it the way we would want it to be. Which is, let's bring it all together. Let's truly create the fusion of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Let's expose people to maybe the not so pretty side of daily life and the historical realities that have existed for so long. And when I first announced that we were going to take a trip to Israel, so many anti-Zionists and anti-Israeli people reached out to me with very choice words, you know, attacking me. You know, how could you? This is a horrible thing that you're doing. You know, don't you know what the Israeli government is doing to Palestinians? And you know, my response, you know, I'm from Queens. You know, my response is like, yeah, that's why we're doing this. What are you doing? Sitting on the couch and attacking me? You know, we're trying to create that. Yeah, it's only 30 people at a time, but that's how we transform the world. And as Shelly proved, you know, one person can transform the entire planet. So we really, you know, and that's why we connected with Meji, you know, Shelly's guidance, you know, to make sure that our activities were filled with, you know, meeting Palestinian women who had self-empowered and elevated themselves into creating businesses, that we were with groups like the Parent Circle, where, you know, there you were sitting in a room with the parent of a girl who was killed who was blown up by a suicide bomb on a bus in Tel Aviv, or something along those lines. There they were, sitting, holding hands, connected to a Palestinian man whose sister had been killed by Israeli bullets. You know, and so suddenly you were like, if they can learn to get along, then nothing is impossible. And so Shelly really crafted this very, very rich experience where, you know, we would, you know, visit, you know, Dome of the Rock, and then that night we would have this other experience where we'd be, you know, at the border of Lebanon and Syria, and then, you know, the next day we'd be encountering these other people on a social, on a political, on a familial type of situation. And you know, I think that we had so much fun, and it was so intense, and probably Shelly cried a lot more than me on our first trip. You know,
I
but
cry all the time. I'm like,
right.
I'm officially like a crier all the time, by the way.
Right. So like tears were flowing, but so, you know, and we were swimming in the Dead Sea. You know, I mean, like everything. It was.
No, you were swimming in my tears.
Right. That's why it was so salty. That's why I was floating. You know, so, you know, we did the whole Megillah. We did it all. And, you know, I think seeing the wholeness of all the experiences, or at least, you know, as many as we could possibly connect to, that blew the minds of everyone we brought. You know, they thought, oh, they were going to sit there and walk the Stations of the Cross, you know, or they thought they were going to go like visit this holy temple and, you know, or pray at the wall. And then suddenly it was even a deeper experience because of that. So I want to thank Meji for really hooking us up with really, the greatest guides that anyone could ever have, and greatest drivers at times that anyone could ever have, because that created this really rich fabric. And like, I don't want to just be a tour guide. That's not my jam. It's not my thing. I want to bring people, if they trust me, transport them to that moment where they get to see with their own eyes, and then they get to have their own aha moments, and then they get to transform their own lives, and then they get to talk about it and transform. And there's a bunch of people, who are with us right now on this call, who have taken that journey with us, and I know that their lives have been shifted forever, and we know that their inner dialogue has shifted, and your inner dialogue becomes your outer dialogue. And so I believe that it's step by step, often baby steps, but for me, the convergence of me, Shelly, Meji, our guides, our drivers, and the posse that we have brought with us, a few times, I think has made a powerful shift in understanding really what's going on in Israel, on the planet. We live in the United States. It's pretty polarized here, if you hadn't noticed. And so, people get to bring that depth of compassion. And in Sanskrit, not in Hebrew, but in Sanskrit, the word for compassion is karuna. So I would like to let everyone know that you may think this is the coronavirus, but no, this is the karuna virus. This is our opportunity to truly flow compassion, which is more than empathy. As Shelly said, about bearing burdens, compassion starts with sympathy. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Then moves to empathy, which is, I feel your pain. Gets a little further, which is, and I'm rooting for your suffering to end. And the most extreme on that continuum is, and I'm willing to bear your burden. And so if we can just recognize that we can easily transcend corona with karuna, and transcend all this fear, all this antagonism, all the finger pointing, just by rooting for other people because they're just like us, and being willing to bear their burden at times. I think that's how our planet gets to the next level. I view this as a great opportunity for humans on planet Earth. The Earth will be fine. We've been trying to destroy it for like hundreds of years. We can't destroy it. We'll destroy us. But Earth is doing just fine. But how about we view this as an opportunity to really raise our own personal vibrations and then share that. And so thank you for having us on your podcast here, because that creates another opportunity to connect with more people.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. And we got one more question before we leave from one of the people who joined us, and he's asked about how did your families respond to this transformation? Your families, your friends, what was the response of that, and did it affect those relationships?
Well,
Shelly and I are very, very different when it comes to that, because she's got about 7,000 relatives, and I think they're all like in the next room while she's here.
No. Believe it or not, I am alone today for like days. I'm in retreat today. It's great.
For me, it was like the game changer of my life. Everyone I knew, pretty much thought I had gone crazy. Everyone in my family thought I had a break with reality. Why would you give up a successful corporate career for nothingness? Literally nothingness. And why would you continue on that journey? Because it's clearly, it's not about the money. It's about the sparks. It's about community. It's about these other aspects that bring such deep fulfillment, to life. And it's actually one of the reasons I love hanging out with Shelly, because my family's very, very tiny. Both my parents were only children. and my mom died when I was young, and so it's my family's really, really tight, but I feel part of Shelly's 7,000 relatives, because I think I was okay with that. I let it all go. It's like, here's my path. If you're with me, great. If you're not, whatever. And Shelly is a much more responsible adult than I am. And so like she showed up for Shabbat dinner every single week for her entire life. And so Shelly, maybe you could talk about your situation.
Yeah, well, so I will say when I part of starting my journey was letting go of things that no longer serve me, and so that led to a divorce. But that's in the past. But insofar as like how my relatives, certainly I think my mother to this day is to some degree still really perplexed by like what I do, what I am, what I believe. But I think she, is getting with the program because she believes what other people tell her. So when they tell her that they're proud of me, then she's like, oh yeah, me too. I'm very proud as well. But I grew up as an Orthodox Jew in a Sephardic family. My mother was one of 17 children. And so I have hundreds of first, second, third cousins, basically everywhere, littered everywhere in Israel, now around the world actually. And it's interesting because some are still very religious, way more religious than even when we grew up, and some are completely secular, and are like tatted up and the whole 9 yards. They really run the gamut. But I think it's just a matter of, it's being able to make sure that people understand that just because my belief is different than theirs, and this is my message home to my mother all the time, like just because we don't see eye to eye on how we believe in source or how we practice our beliefs doesn't mean that we still can't care for one another and that we can't coexist. And that I'm still, I'll still be the first person that shows up for you when you need me. So, my family is dealing with it because they don't have another choice. It's either cut me off and never talk to me again, which was part of my journey, but that's a whole nother story. That's when I got married to a non-Jewish, my husband now, Jason, 10 years ago. My parents didn't talk to me for 2 years. But they got over it, because love conquers all. And so as long as you keep showing up and you believe what you believe and you follow your heart, and like Davidji says, you just follow that path and eventually people get on the bus, as long as you keep the door open and you slow down enough. So every once in a while I'd make that stop, open the door, look around, make sure no one's running towards the bus, and then I'd shut the door, and once in a while somebody gets on the bus.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I was inspired from all of your answers, and I really appreciate both of you joining us today. We'll just say a word about next week before we really close up. We'll be talking about better days, which is what we're all hoping for. We'll talk about traveling in this time of global pandemic, how it's affecting the world in different spots. We'll have a few different interviewees that will talk about various topics within this global pandemic and then how it's affecting their lives. So thank you again. Aziz, anything you'd like to add?
I think that's good, except that, like usual, it's not where we travel, but it's how we travel.
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Davidji.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.